I'll tell a little bit about where today it takes me 10 minutes to put my shoes and socks on. I'll tell you about my fastest moving, fastest thinking, most action day, and fastest action of my life. I worked the sand table, so every day I was instructing where the CP was going to be and where we were going to land. I talked about the 513th Infantry being there first, and I'd say they probably will have all the Germans wiped out before we get there. We'll have nothing to do. But anyway, it came the day of the jump, and I don't know why I was still there, but I was pretty excited about going over. I don't think I was a bit scared. And I stayed till the last man got out and was out there. A lot of guys were having a picture taken with the two generals who were going to jump with us. And I stayed and I watched our Colonel Booth. He had all the pilots surrounding him. And I saw Colonel Booth, his jaw jutted out, and he's pounding his fist like this. And the pilots, the heads were bent over. And I stayed, and I shouldn't have been there. It's rather than have me court-martialed. But I asked one of the pilots on the way out, what was that all about? He said, your colonel wants us to jump you guys at 400 feet. We never had a meeting on that. We never knew that. And they didn't want us to jump at 400 feet because they'd be all subject, the planes would be subject even to rifle fire. Anyway, when I got out, I was supposed to be in the fire command. I couldn't find her outfit. And Colonel Booth, I guess it was him, he said, was one seat left on our plane, the last man out of the first plane. So I got on the plane, I was the last man out. The two generals were on that plane, Colonel Booth, our battalion Sergeant Morgan, and so we went over. And we took off, and as we approached the Rhine, it was going tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. I thought it was all heavy raindrops hitting the plane. It was all the yak-yak. And Laura Morgan told me afterwards, a couple of shots came right up where they were sitting. But the guy sitting next to me was a sergeant, and he was airsick. And I said, trying to perk him up, I said, boy, I understand those two generals riding with us, never saw any combat, and only had a couple of jumps in all their training. I said, suppose they freeze in the door. And of course they didn't. He said they better not. He couldn't wait to get out of the plane. Well, as we got to the Rhine, we didn't get knocked down. We got that order, stand up, hook up, hand off, stand in the door, go, 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 go. And I'm the last man out. And I'll never forget it. After you fall 75 feet, I look up at that beautiful blossom of that shoot. The second thing I looked at, how I could remember all this, the second thing I looked at, this is all in seconds, and where it takes me so long to do things today. The second thing I looked at was all the paratroopers jumping out all the way down the field. And the third thing I looked at the ground, no parachutes. I knew the infantry wasn't there. I didn't know at that time they jumped 5 miles away. But I thought, boy, I'm going to have to, real fast thinking, I'm going to have to put my 4 years plus experience into action. And when I got on the ground, I had the easiest, softest landing we ever had of all my jumps. And I'm laying on the ground, there are puffs of dust all around me, and I think, what the hell was that? And all of a sudden, how lucky can I get? A machine gun ball took a chunk out of my boot, out of the sole of my boot, but missed my foot. And later on, I tried to keep the boot, and they gave me another pair of boots that were too small for me, and I still have them, but they wouldn't let me keep that boot. Anyway, as I got laying on my back, and I might shoot real fast, and I looked around. I knew that the ground, since I worked that sand table, I knew every piece of that ground. And I looked around, and the CP was only about 50 yards away, and I got up and dashed to the CP. When I entered the house, there were only a few guys in there, and I think Captain McGee was coming down the steps with 45 in the sand, and of course I'm going through the rooms, and next thing you know, before you knew it, the whole place was crowded. And but I was in fire command, but I didn't know where Major Roby was, and I became a Lone Ranger. And as I'm racing towards things, I come across one of our groups. They seem to be all pinned down in front of this house. And so I jump over a hedgerow, dash up the house, don't get shot. There was no firing coming. So all the guys got up and they started coming up the house. Next thing I thought, well, geez, I ought to really go in and check the house out. And only one guy followed me in the house, and the whole group is still coming up. And as we're going through each room, don't come across any Germans. Then I finally hear a noise down the basement, and I didn't even know who was with me. I'm not looking at him. I'm looking for Germans. I signaled at him to open the basement door, and I get out a hand grenade. I'd 80 hand grenades in Cincinnati. Everybody had I think they got 2 given out to them. But when I went to get hand grenades, nobody was around. I'm pulling up my musette bag until one of the troopers stopped me. What are you going to do with all them? I said, well, I like them. But anyway, I was ready to throw the hand grenade down. I was ready to throw the hand grenade down the basement, and thank God I heard the whimpering of a woman. Boy, I was just so lucky. And so as we got them to march out, the other trooper was in the rear and I was in the front. As we marched out and on the ground, one woman got down on her hands and knees begging for mercy, and I thought, boy, that's out of character for a German woman. And since there were so many there, I left that group and took off for my next mission. And I come up the next mission, guys are shooting in the woods at the Germans, and I come running up and I take out 2 hand grenades, and I pull a pin, I throw one, and run up and I throw another one. And all the Germans, shortly after that, started marching out of the woods with their hands over their head. And I see one guy still has his pistol in his holster, and I run over and grab it, take it out. That was my first P-38. So when all these guys capture these Germans, they'd take them off. I don't know where they're taking them. So I took off and went to my next mission. I came across another group, and the same thing, more or less, and I got my second P-38. And I forget how I got that, but I got it. So I got 2 P-38s, and then I start running again, leave that group. I start running again. I come across the house, and the whole upstairs window's all blown out, and I figured, well, this is where the Germans would be if anybody's up there, because it's all open. And so I take a hand grenade and I toss up through the window. Incidentally, in part of my training, there were 2 Marines came back from Japan fighting the Japanese, and that's when I really learned about hand grenades, how important it was, because the Japanese would hide under sides of grass, and the Marines told me they were hip shooters, and they used the hand grenades. So I really liked hand grenades. And then finally, forgetting some of the stuff that happened, I finally get to in the woods, and I duck behind a tree as I hear one noise. The guy, it was an Englishman, the only Englishman. He was wandering in the woods. How he ever got there, it's the only Englishman I saw. He was jumped way off a course. And I said, you better go back that way. There's no Germans back that way. You break it out of here, you get killed. So I start going through the woods, and I think it's down there with the high wire, extension wires, and I come across 5 Germans all laying there. They were looking out that way, and I'm behind a bush and trees. And I'm thinking, should I throw a hand grenade? Should I start shooting? What should I do? But luckily, one of the Germans got up, I guess, to relieve himself, and I pop up in front of his face with my folding stock carbine up there. I couldn't even lift it with 2 hands today, but one hand I got that, and I got him. And I said, geez, I'm wondering what should I do? But he's in front of me, so I figured if they start shooting, I'll at least get some of them. And so I started thinking, I said, Brigade Slunsman, you're completely surrounded. Surrender and live a long, happy life. And sure enough, they get up, I guess. And the one officer, he has his Luger butt end towards me, holding his hand out, I guess, and up I guess here. And I got my 3rd gun, a Luger. And they marched out. And it's the first time I saw so many captured. I marched them out of the field and double timing. I was so fast and so slow today. But as I got up there, the one guy said, "Here comes John Wayne of the 17th." Well, John Wayne was just become. I said, "Huh?" And so I delivered the prisoners. I'm ready to leave. And then one of the other guards said, "Hey, how about staying? Nobody wants to stay." And I guess they were all. And I saw the group of Germans that were captured. I didn't know how many there were, but General gave us reports that there were 350 captured. They were up in the hill. I found out later, Colonel Booth had one of the 85's cannons point up at the group. One of the gun crew pointed as it got up. And I watched up. There were no officers there. That surprised me. And I started emptying. I started taking over. I asked 10 Germans to come forward and empty their pockets. And some of the young kids had new issued like manicuring kits. And so I took 2 of the newer little scissors, and Michelle had both of them up at college. I still have them. And but I figured, well, that's a waste of time. In the meantime, mortar shells were coming in the back, and they all started to jump down, lay down, and I made them all stand up. And surprised, no officers was there giving orders. And the one German spoke perfect English. He said the one guy there standing up real tall and everything, he must have been a proud German. He had a shot in the groin, shot in the shoulder, and a bullet hole in his cheek here. And he's standing up straight. And that's amazing. But anyway, that night, truck drivers came in and said, "What do you have?" And they talked me out of the 3 guns. They were heavy to carry. I threw 5 hand grenades altogether. I still had 3 left. And they talked me out of the guns. And the one guy said, "Boy, get rid of them. The SS troopers will get you." Well, I was infallible at that time. Hey, you get me, I'll get them. And the one guy was real good. He said, "Look," he said, "we'll give my buddies here. I'll give you $125 for the P-38, so I'll give you $130 for the Luger." And so that was easier to carry. And I had that $380 in my pocket. And it was American money they gave me, too. And I was surprised. And after one of our reunions, I never knew the guy I never knew who bought the guns, but the guy that got the Luger sent a Christmas card to me after our first reunion in '84 that I ran. He said, "I wish I still had that Luger," and I should have brought copies of that with me. "I wish I still had that Luger because I would give it back to you as a gift." And I never knew who that person was until in the '90s. I asked Doc Morgan, "Did by chance you knew who that guy was?" He said, "Yeah, he's the guy that gave you." One time we were sitting at a table like this at the reunion, at the next reunion, and he put 2 little parachute wings on the table. You attach your watch. I still have it. And I said, "How much do you owe you?" "Nothing." And he walked away. I never knew who he was. He was a guy that was up there as a guard with the memorial of all the guys who were killed. And I found out in the '90s, imagine this is, 50 years after the war, who that guy was. And he